Hello all, and welcome to the Managing Database Changes in a DevSecOps World webinar. I am Melissa Brownlee, the Marketing Manager for Database Tools here at IDERA, and I'm excited to introduce our hosts for today's webinar. As people trickle in, welcome. So we have Lisa Waugh, Senior Product Manager for Data Tools and Data Tools Solutions, and Anil Mahadev, Principal Cloud Solutions Architect for multi-platform database tools. So we're excited to kick this off and get started. But before I kick it over to Lisa, we are going to start with a quick polling question. So I'm going to get this up, and as people trickle in, we're going to be over on your screen, what is your biggest challenge with implementing, here, let me make sure I hit launch. All right, what is your biggest challenge with implementing DevSecOps practices for database management? So you can select one of the following: integrating version control, automating database changes, ensuring robust authentication, or other. So we'll keep that up for a moment to see as we can get some of these polling percentages in, and then we will get into the meat of the webinar. Once again, it's managing database changes in a DevSecOps world. All right, and I'm seeing some numbers come in. Very good. It looks like we're having a little bit more coming back from automating database changes than anything else. All right, a couple seconds more to a minute, so get your answers in. Thank you, and I'm going to close the poll and kick it over to Lisa. All right, one moment, she'll be coming on, just a sec. As you can see on your screen, here are the results from the poll. Okay, and Lisa, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'm just presenting. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
I think it's, let me see.
There we go.
You see it now? Okay. Thank you for answering that question. Thank you, Melissa. So we're going to talk about managing database changes in a DevSecOps world, and we're going to cover what is DevSecOps and why would you care. So we're going to go through the history of what DevOps and how it came into play, and what it was affecting companies. So DevOps is a methodology. It's a mixture of development and operations. And the goal was to change the processes in IT departments so that developers and IT professionals were now communicating and collaborating. They needed to set up environments that were supporting the dev process for building, testing, and deploying their software, and they wanted to make sure that their software was deployed more rapid, more frequently, and more reliable. And there were some challenges. Back in 2000s, there was a huge cloud push and putting environments into the cloud, but also software as a service. And what did that mean? As companies were growing and users were using these technologies, there was more demand for that. So when you talk about software as a service, you're talking about something like Netflix, LinkedIn, Spotify, and all the things that we use today, right? But not only were the complex of providing application applications that provide those services. Where the database came into play is now these actual providers are providing information down to the database layer. So they're gathering information, and those structures are growing over a period of time, and they're using that particular data to make business decisions what they need to do in the future. So as I'm logging into Netflix, for an example, I'm entering information that's about me, what I need to do, what shows I'm looking for, and all that. So you had some big players come into play. You had Amazon, Google, and Microsoft come into play to hosting these applications. And so hosting these applications, provided the easeability of being able to be at home and being able to use the capability that you needed to. When you think about hosting that, you also had to take into store the type of storage they were doing at the point in time. How are they manipulating the storage and taking advantage from the database level? Were they using, S3 components? How were they taking that type of storage and manipulating it, right? Because now this push to the cloud, there's different types of storages, and there's different types of complexity from the database level where they're, in a hybrid environment. They're not only on-premise database, they're a cloud database, and there's different ways of storing the information and manipulating and getting that information. So Google came out, which allowed developers to run their web applications on their infrastructure. And then you had the databases that were actually in the cloud. Microsoft, announced Azure SQL database, and what do you do with that? And then Amazon had the MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, the different flavors of those databases actually in the cloud. And so when we talk about the cloud push, we're talking about environments where managers and database developers and coders had to figure out that complexity. So you have platform as a service, which was the model that enables users to consume that, right? And manage their software development components. You had open source technologies, and developers are coding for open source technologies and frameworks, or whether they're in Java or whatever. You have the complexity of how you're pulling the data out. There's different types of queries that you're manipulating. You have Google, when I pull a query and I'm hosting it on Google, I'm actually paying for that query. So how do I figure out that? And so, you have different types of things you needed to keep into account. You have network accessibility over a network, not just over the internet. You had resource pooling. Was it secure? Was it multi-tenant? So there was this big old cloud push, and a lot of this for on-demand self-services, writing APIs that are hosted. So when you think about the technology and you think about the cloud push and it growing over time, right, you're thinking, what are these developers dealing with when they're trying to code? And why did DevOps come into play? Well, developers were kind of in a silo, and they were coding, and they weren't actually included in the beginning in those infrastructures of moving to the cloud. And what exactly does that mean? Because there's key contributors when you think about the complexity and managing database changes, when we talk about the bottom layer of where actually things are hosted and how they manage that, right? You have to implement the cloud infrastructure, and you need to make sure that they're in key with that. They need to meet compliance and government controls. And how do they go about doing that? Make sure that they're not exposing data that's not supposed to be exposed. They're implementing continuous integration and deployment for these pipelines, right? How are they monitoring, that? Are they scaling vertically and horizontally? How are they able to do that when the database grows? One thing database developers and managers and DBAs care about is how is that data going to grow over a period of time? Do we have a baseline of what happened 2 years ago, and how do we expect our business to grow and our goals, and how are we meeting that over a period of time? How are we resource pooling and being able to use that? Is it secure and is it isolated? What are we actually doing with that? And then we need to gain expertise in the cloud services. If I'm hosting on Google, like I said, I may be charged for that particular query, right? If I run it daily and my coworker runs it daily, then we're getting charged twice for that query. How do we optimize that query so that it's faster, so that we're not spending as much time when we're buying these particular services, right? How do we cultivate a DevOps mindset when we talk about that? And what I mean by a mindset, I mean like with all these changes going on, how are we able to take advantage of all these changes that are happening with the infrastructure and the bottom layer of the database? So there was a research firm that did a survey, DORA, and it was back in 2018. And I kind of always point to this research because it's only like 3 pages long, and we can give it to you guys to use it, or you can look it up online. But it's interesting because it takes a span of 5 years and it interviews 30,000 developer teams. And it has metrics of what they consider measurements of success. But they interviewed different verticals. You know, were they successful based on the vertical? No, that didn't, really matter at the time. Were they successful if they were using open source technologies? No, that didn't really matter. The size of the company, did that really matter? No, the success rate came to 4 key measures of success, and this is what they post on their website today. So the measures of success are the deployment frequency. How often are software team pushing changes into production? Well, those changes are different, right? The deployment frequency would be different from me, who's a small size Lisa's bike shop, as to some global BlackRock, right? What is that deployment frequency for your particular company? When you're taking into account the business purposes, you need to take into account every aspect of that. What's the change lead time it takes to get committed code to run in production? That matters, and it's going to be different based on the company size and some variables, right? Are you doing any type of baselines to manage the change lead time? And then we all make mistakes, right? So the change failure rate, the share of incidents or rollbacks and failures, what's your failure rate and what's acceptable to fail? Are you taking baselines of snapshots of production at a certain point in time so that you can roll back? And the ultimate goal was time to restore the service, right? Time it takes to put that service back in production after an incident occurred, and what's acceptable. Now, these variables are different for every company, but the measurement of success is when they put their processes into play to take care of each one of these points in time, right? These changes that are happening. So the adoption rate of DevOps, development and operation, and those practices to make their processes more efficient is 77% of organizations use some type of DevOps practices. Now, keep in mind, when I did this global DevOps market size forecast, I got 3 different versions. So it's kind of skewed based on the financial institution you're querying. Yahoo Finance says one thing, ChatGPT says another thing. But the goal to keep in mind is that organizations consider it important, and it's millions of dollars, and it's going up over a period of time, right? In 2028, it's supposed to grow up to millions of dollars. And this is an average I took based of all the market shares I got back. So you can see it's growing into the millions of dollars. Well, when we talked about the measurement for success, right, we were talking about changes. We were talking about deployment frequency. How often are those going in, the lead time of the change, and the change failure rate. And when you talk about changes, you're talking about security concerns. And where does that come into play? So when you talk about dev security ops, you're actually talking about how do you manage that whole overall process when you're building the infrastructure to support these development teams who are making changes in the database and making changes in the application, right? So the key was security needs to come at every stage in the development cycle from beginning to end. So when you have all these teams, the development, security and operations, communicating and collaborating, you're accounting for each one of those processes. So what came into play over the period of time is that identity providers came in, right? So not only did Microsoft, Google, and some of the key players come into play, they decided they needed to solve this process for how you're getting into the database, how you're getting into applications, how do we control that development and that security based on those changes, because changes is the top 3 key things they care about, and how do they minimize those changes. So the market forecast, and again, I round this 3 different ways, is different based on that. And keep in mind that when you talk about dev security operations, you're just talking about the development process. You also have security that encompasses DevOps and Dev Security Ops. And this is into the billions of dollars. So those identity providers like Microsoft, Entra, are solving those problems that they saw that were happening. Like, we have 10 logins, we have 10 passwords, we're storing different passwords, we're constantly asking, how do I get the best password? So they're trying to solve that by providing single sign-on. How do you get into the database once? How do you provide one single sign-on for your applications, and how do we solve that? Not only did they try to solve the problem for single sign-on, they tried to solve the problem for multi-factoring. Not only do you sign on, but how do we make sure it's you? How do we make sure that you're getting some type of response back that that's the user who's supposed to be getting in? So as you can see, this is in the billions of dollars now, and it's key. The key thing is, how do you manage those changes from the whole development process from start to end? There is the collaboration driver, key driver. Collaboration and communication is key. Security is big key, security. And the architecture, the overall architecture of moving from on-premise into the cloud, or to managing those changes from multiple environments, multiple different types of databases, and multiples, way you query, NoSQL versus SQL. How do you manage those changes when you're moving into production? And then testing, as we saw by the automated database changes, how do you make sure that those snapshots are in line, and how do you automate those changes and make sure you're comparing development to production? So this is what Dev Security Ops is, and you can see how important it is to the business. And now I'm going to hand it over to Anil, and he's going to show you how you use some of these processes and what tools you can do to help you with that. Anil, can you take control over it now?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Okay.
Can you folks see my screen, please?
I can.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lisa. That was very enlightening and a great info there. So, adding to what Lisa had said, I will be covering some of the more technical details on where the typical implementation that you would actually go ahead and go with. So for example, here we're talking about Git, version control, or Azure DevOps. Now, the fundamental aspect is I want to make it product agnostic, so I'll just refer to version control going forward. So version control is very critical as you're doing your development lifecycle process. As soon as you check in code, you want to make sure that all of that code is versioned and it's ready for your DevOps CI/CD pipelines. The overall benefit of using database version control, it also helps you enhance project transparency, stability, and efficiency, thereby streamlining the development and deployment processes. Here you can see in one of our flagship products, we have DB Artisan, where we have support for Git integration. And that's where you can also manage multiple databases within a single UI platform. This will enable you to kickstart your DevOps process for the databases. And once this is done, we can then implement the various security mechanisms by bringing in the database security ops team into the mix. So what are some of the integrated providers that we can talk about? Here, I'm just giving you an example of Microsoft Entra. Microsoft Entra is now the new name for Azure Active Directory. So here it offers a very advanced features such as single sign-on, conditional access, and adaptive authentication to protect against modern security threats. These are very much crucial. By integrating all of these into the existing Microsoft services. Entra enables simplified user management and also enhances productivity while still maintaining stringent security standards. One of the most comprehensive areas that we'll make sure is, again, as Lisa alluded to, you first authenticate based on a username or password, or based on a token, or it could be a multi-factor, where you don't want to enter the password, you just have an app notification that are available these days. That in itself helps you to next take it to the next level, which is authorization. And with authorization, you will authorize that user what they have access to once they're authenticated. Once they say who they are, what are they authorized to perform certain tasks. This greatly helps you in reducing the risk of unauthorized access and cyber threats. Here you can see an example of a screenshot where we can go ahead and show you in the product where we have support for Microsoft Entra authentication. And this in itself, as we're modernizing the security framework and keeping up with different identity providers, this really is paramount for organizations to stay current with all these technologies. Now, coming to the database change, here you can see on the left-hand side, I have a set of SQL statements that I've generated. And these SQL files are all going to be part of my DevSecOps processes. So now here you can see I have an example of a DB2 database, and that on the left-hand side, you can look at the project where we have all of these SQL statements are ready to be pushed into a version control system. And here we have another offering of database change management, which here you can see I've registered an Oracle database. And with that, the authentication we have is Microsoft Entra. Next, here in this area, excuse me, we do have the ability to take a look at a database system and also being able to save the configuration for our version control. So let me give you a scenario. So let's say that you have a development database that your development team is churning out SQL day in and day out, and they need to deploy these changes to production. Once this goes into play, you are able to go ahead and look at the configuration of that development database, and also perform the configuration archive comparison with your production database. Here you can see I've just taken a sample database of Oracle 21C, and here you can see all the configurations that's been listed. Next, what happens after that, then you go ahead and try to push your schema changes onto the production database. So before you do that, you want to go ahead and generate the source from the development database, and then go ahead and push it to the target database. Here you can see I have a primary database and a secondary database. I've called them primary user and failover user, respectively. You'll notice on the left-hand side that we have a snapshot, so which is using an archive through which we're actually comparing the production database on the right. So in any kind of high availability or disaster recovery scenario, database change management is crucial for making sure that that project succeeds. So here you can actually see I've registered both the primary database as well as the failover database here on the left-hand side of the tree. And the target database scripts that it's going to generate is the actual failover script, as you can see here. Next, once you've identified all of those, you want to make sure you want to compare your source to the target. So here, oftentimes, the target has the schema already, but here I'm just giving you an example. What if you wanted to deploy this to a empty schema? So here you can see I have the source DDL that talks about how you can go ahead and create that source table. And in the target DDL, we're actually seeing that there's nothing compared. So we're basically doing a comparison between the two systems. Next, we can show you here that once the change has been implemented, we can actually see those tables in the that have been affected by the change management tool of choice. And lastly, we can have a look at all of those objects being created into the target failover database. So again, this requires a little bit of drill, so DR drill, if you will, and that can actually help you enhance resilience for your mission critical systems as part of your DevSecOps strategy. So in conclusion, what is the value of DevSecOps and why use it, especially for databases? Well, it's very crucial for the success for the continuous development and streamlining of operations, and most importantly, enhancing the efficiency and collaboration. This is very important. I would like to stress on efficiency and collaboration because within a DevSecOps, you don't want to repeat yourself. You want to have a consistent methodology that works and a system that is tested against all the odds. And finally, if you look at how you can implement authentication and authorization, followed by making sure that the version control has all the roles and privileges required for those development teams, database development teams, to perform these operations pretty seamlessly. And most importantly, why is it important for having a DevSecOps strategy for your organization? To drive success and above all, maintain a competitive advantage. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Melissa.
All right, so before we definitely have the questions section open if you'd like to add any of your own questions. And also, if you would like to learn any more from our experts, please feel free to scan the code on your screen. We have a couple more polling questions that we'd like to go through to keep a little bit more engagement going as you guys are possibly filling out some more questions. So let's go to one of the first ones, which would be, so which DB Power Studio product are you using? So let me launch that poll. All right, so as you see, it's DB Artisan, DB Change Manager, DB Optimizer, Rapid SQL, or if you are in the process of evaluating. So we'll keep that poll up for about another minute, see if we get a few answers from there. And again, feel free to put in any of your questions into the chat. We'll make sure to get back to you about them. Looks like we're getting some results now. See some Rapid SQL and evaluating. And some DB Artisan, great to hear. Very neat, and thank you guys all for your participation. Let me share those results so we can see everyone who's been able to answer. We really appreciate it. All right. And then I think we have at least one other one that we'd love to ask you guys. So let me throw this one up. So does your organization currently use multi-factor authentication for database access? So you can select one of the following as discussed before. And Anil or Lisa, feel free to hop in. Got a couple questions. Let's see.
Yep, I'm responding to one of them, Melissa. So.
Okay. Well, do you want to read that out while we got the poll question
Sure.
up?
So in Postgres DB platform, what is a DR strategy? Well, it depends on your replication or what kind of a cluster, a Sloani replication, or any kind of a clustering strategy that you might want to use. So that is what you would be there. With regard to Liquibase, I have not used that product, so I cannot mention that. So we can respond to you offline. So feel free to use the QR code and we can get back to you on that.
Perfect. Thank you. And so I'm going to close this one and I will share some of our results to be able to see. So some people aren't using it at all. Yes, and only for sensitive data second, and then for all. And I do have one last one while we have a couple more questions coming in. And Anil, if you see anything interesting, feel free to shout it out. But this last one, you can fill in while Anil is explaining. It's what version control are you currently using? So feel free to select, and then I'll throw it back to you, Anil.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we don't have any other questions. Well, one of the questions was, is this being recorded and will it be sent? Yes, it will be. It is being recorded, and we will send you the recording as soon as it is ready.
Yep, everyone will receive it. Okay, we're getting some responses here. It seems like the majority are coming in with get as the answer, followed by other. And again, if you have answers to other, feel free to throw them in the questions as well. All right, and that's about a minute. So I'm going to close this up and we'll share the results. And as you can see, the majority are currently using Get. We'd like to thank you all for joining our webinar. And Anil, if you wouldn't mind throwing that QR code right up on the screen one more time.
Sure, absolutely. Great. Give me 1 second, please. And then I think, there we go. Let me change my presenter thing. Give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm. And so just feel free. So if you'd like to talk to any of our experts, please reach out.
Oh yeah, there we go.
On the screen.
Here's the QR code. Yep.
Thank you. And thank you guys for a wonderful webinar. This will be sent out, so you will have access to the recording. And thank you to both of our presenters. Thank you, Lisa and Anil.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.